Alright, we're back here to talk about some Final Fantasy IX Remake. We're here to look at another rumor for the game. This didn't come across myself. Somebody actually commented on my previous 9 info rumor video that we did almost 2 weeks ago at this point. I was wondering if I would talk about it, so here we are. I will say right out the gate that it seems like everybody is in agreement that this leak or rumor isn't even remotely real. There's 2 posts for it. There's the original post in the Final Fantasy IX subreddit, and then somebody cross-posted it to the Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit. And everybody in the replies is just saying it's not legit, it's bullshit or whatever, it's fake. And the posts are downvoted to 0. Also, the account that posted it was just created today, which obviously throws up a bit of a red flag. But they did say that they're on kind of a burner account to post this stuff so that, they don't get caught or whatever. Something else that gives off a bit of a weird vibe is that the person tried to post this in multiple subreddits. Initially, the Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit 15 hours ago as I'm recording. And that post got deleted, and then they tried to post it in the Final Fantasy subreddit as of 14 hours ago right now. The post is still pending as of right now, and then 13 hours ago they posted it in the 9 subreddit. This gives off a bit of a weird vibe to me of I'm desperate to get this post out there. I'm trying in multiple subreddits over the course of a couple of hours. That's kind of a weird thing. You don't normally see that. If we go back to the video we did almost 2 weeks ago, that person posted it in the Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit, and that was it. They didn't try to post it in every other fucking Final Fantasy thing, right? Also, I'm not entirely sure why the post itself was deleted in the Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit, because the one we talked about almost 2 weeks ago is still up as of right now. And it's downvoted to 0, and everybody in the replies is saying it's not real. Maybe they just don't want too many of those kinds of posts in the subreddit. I don't know. Kind of a long-winded intro to say that it's potentially not real. We're still going to look at it anyways because of the possibility that it could be. But also, even if it's not real, these are kind of fun to tear apart sometimes. We did this a lot leading up to Remake and Rebirth. So, let's hop right into it. Sharing some Final Fantasy IX Remake details. I am obviously using a throwaway for secrecy. English is my third language, so I apologize for any grammar mistakes. Choose if you want to or won't believe it. Relationship won't be stated to protect their identity with someone who is working for a big name game dev company, not Square directly, but reputable enough for me to assume they have at least some little inside info. They have seen and actually played some build of Final Fantasy IX, and I was able to ask her a little bit of info regarding the game. Just to reiterate, this is secondhand information, so it's up to you if you choose to believe it. So right out the gate, the opening paragraph, there's multiple things that stand out to me before we even get into the actual info for the game. For one, they talk about, English being their third language or whatever, so if there's any grammatical errors, they apologize. But having read this thing only one time so far, but having read through the whole post, I don't think there's any grammatical errors at all. In fact, they have a pretty good grasp on English. So that's kind of a weird thing to say. They also say multiple times in the open paragraph that you can choose to believe it or not. It's we get it. It's a rumor. It's a leak. We know that shit. You can say it one time and that's fine, but to say it multiple times in the first couple of sentences is strange. Also, they didn't want to say what kind of relationship they have with this person because they're trying to protect their identity. But then they also go on to refer to them as a her, giving away their gender, which is strange. Another thing that's kind of weird, not necessarily important, but they say that English is their third language, and they repeat that at the bottom of the post, but then in parentheses put fourth with a question mark, and it's what is it? Is English your third language, your fourth language? How do you not know how well-versed you are in the multiple languages that you speak? It's kind of weird. Plan might have changed now, but originally it was intended to be a timed console exclusive to Switch 2 and also PC to capture Nintendo audience, young and general public, together with the cartoon series, probably multi-platform now with the new reform. So this is sort of something we've seen before with the last rumor we looked at where they said that it was PS5 and Switch 2. This one's saying that it's Switch 2 and PC initially, and that it might be multi-platform now. For one, this comes down to the IX Remake itself. What is it? Does it need to be current gen only? Does it need to be Switch 2? Does it need to be PS5? That's obviously something that we just can't possibly know right now. But if it's the kind of remake that can work on last gen, on Switch and PS4 and stuff like that, they're 100% going to do it. Because why wouldn't they? That's a massive, massive player base, install base, right? You have over 100 million Switches sold in the world and over 100 million PS4 sold in the world. There's, I think, somewhere around 300 million if you combine the two. Massive, massive audience if you can get your game sold on those platforms, right? And why wouldn't you? But that just comes down to what the IX Remake itself is. Regardless, I don't think it's going to be any level of exclusive, timed or otherwise. Dev for the game has changed hands multiple times. Square not the main developer, but is supervising. So this one's pretty interesting because it completely contradicts with what we've heard before from Midori, back when we were covering Midori's stuff or whatever. They said the opposite, that it was an outsourced project that Square Enix brought in-house to make themselves, right? So, out of the two, I would trust Midori more. They didn't have 100% flawless record with their information, but they were still pretty damn good, right? And this is just some random person on Reddit. So, originally mid-scale, but the scope of the game ballooned to HD title and is possibly now cut in 2 parts. Unsure, hopefully not, to be honest. It ends with the mist vanishing from the continent, and the consequences of it in dagger coordination, at least from the build version they had played. This is another one that, is kind of hard to have a discussion about because we just don't know what the 9 Remake is, which is unfortunate. It's one of the problems when talking about the game is just we don't know if it's just a visual remake or if they're trying to do something similar to the 7 Remake, something in that sort of direction. And if it is, I wouldn't be surprised that it's a multiple release thing, right? But if it's just some sort of like visual overhaul that, maybe messes with the gameplay a little bit, kind of like the Crisis Core Reunion, then you can do that in one release, right? So I don't know. It's hard to really know right now. As I said, I think like every time we talk about this, I'm kind of in the middle on it. If they just want to do a visual overhaul, I'm cool with it. I want to tweak the combat a little bit, I'm fine. If you want to do something like 7 Remake, I'm fine with that too. I'm just kind of whatever. I haven't played through Final Fantasy IX in a handful of years at this point. So for you 9 experts out there, would this be a good stopping point, what they said? Like the mist clearing and the dagger coordination? Like if theoretically the 9 Remake is split into 2 parts, is that a good stopping point? Big story changes, but overall plot seems to be the same, some mentioned. Salamander and Ico appear earlier, but not as party members yet. Cargo ship sequence is different. All 3 Black Waltzes appear for boss fight. Black Waltz number 2 is female from the voice acting. Salamander and Lanny first appear in Limblom Festival of the Hunt. No outer continent. Ifatry is inside Mist Continent in a remote island. Ruby plays bigger role and participate in the kidnapping heist. There will be big set-piece icon battles in Limblom with Rama and Atomus, and in Ifatry with Bahamut Leviathan. Freya character design looks very different, but still rat race. So, kind of a lot to unpack there. First off, they say there's big story changes, but the plot's overall the same, so maybe something comparable to 7 Remake in that regard. They also say that Salamander or Amaranth and Ico appear earlier in the story, which is a little bit weird. I could understand doing something with Amaranth because of his character, like he doesn't get enough. So having him show up earlier. It'd be weird for Ico to be in the story earlier because her whole thing is being from Maiden Suri. However you say the location's name, the Summoner Village or whatever, like that's her whole character more or less, up to a certain point, right? Like that's where she's from. And after her parents died, she's lived there with the Mughals for like however long. So like, why would she be anywhere else? Also, speaking of the Summoner Village, they say that the entire outer continent's not in the game. What? What does that mean? Why would they just get rid of an entire continent full of so many locations? Namely the Ifatry, which is like one of the most important locations in the entire goddamn game. This is probably the most bullshit thing in the whole thing for me. There's probably other things that are equally as bad in some ways, but just like, they're gonna get rid of an entire continent. Okay. I can maybe accept that they wanted to move the tree somewhere else. Ifatry, however the fuck you say it. I could maybe sort of accept that, but you're ignoring all the other locations, and the Summoner Village being one of the most like crucial locations in a lot of ways, right? It's like the backstory for Garnet and Ico's people. Like, you're ignoring that. Like, where are they putting all the other locations from the outer continent? What? What else do we got? They say that the cargo ship sequence is different and that we fight all 3 Black Waltz in a boss fight. I don't know if they're trying to say that we don't do like the individual fights with them. We just fight them all at one time at one point. If that's the case, that sucks. I don't know if that's whether or not that's true or not is irrelevant. That just sucks. I actually like the Black Waltz fights. They also mentioned that the Black Waltz 2 is a female based on the voice acting, but just completely glance over the fact that they're saying that there's voice acting in the game. Like, why isn't that one of their points? It's kind of a big deal. Maybe that's to be expected if it's something that's kind of on par with the 7 Remake, but still, we don't know now. We don't have confirmation or anything, obviously, that there is voice acting, so you think that'd be like a bigger thing to point out. They say that you meet Amaranth and Lonnie for the first time, Lanny, however you say her name, in the Festival of the Hunt, which that's not any different from the original FF9 for her, if I'm not mistaken. It's where you do first meet her. If they want to move Amaranth there, I guess that can make some sense. I can see his character participating in that a little bit. There's going to be big set-piece fights with the summons. They specifically mentioned Rama and Atomus, which that makes a little bit of sense with FF9, because you get Rama and then you see Atomus attack in Limblom, so maybe those two would fight, I guess. And then Leviathan and Bahamut, which would be where you get Leviathan whenever Bahamut like kills Queen Braun or whatever, right? One thing, though, they call them icons, and I don't know if this is like a mistake or if that's what they're called in Final Fantasy IX in Japan, but in English they're called Eidolons, I think is how you say the word. Kind of quickly looking through the franchise, like I'm pretty sure 16 is the only one that's ever called them icons. Maybe they just had 16 on the brain. But a majority of the franchises refer to the summons as like Espers or Eidolons, and then it's like Aeons and 10 and Guardian Forces and 8, and just called summons and 7. Maybe it's that third language English they're talking about. No, I guess the last few that we haven't talked about, they mentioned Ruby being a bigger part of the story, part of the kidnapping, whatever. And they're going to change Freya drastically. She's still, the rat people, but they would change her character design a lot. Why would they do that? It's just dumb. We might speedrun some of these last few here. Supportability / magic stones are tied to the lore, something to do with the mist, not sure what it meant. What does it even mean? Let's just continue. Stories seem to have more heavy emphasis on the mist than in the OG. I don't even know what the hell this means because the mist is a major part of the Final Fantasy IX story with Garland and Terra and all that shit. I'm not even going to go into it because you played Final Fantasy IX. Tetramaster is using a dice roll system for card battles. So clearly this is one we got to stop and talk about for a second, just because, you know, I like my card games and RPGs. With like Triple Triad and 8 and Tetramaster and 9, they're pretty simple card games for the most part. They're not like super complicated. And I don't know how you'd implement a dice system into them. Like, what would that even do? What are you using dice for in that shit? I don't even understand it. It's just weird to me. They already have like a system in place for how cards battle in like 8 and 9, right? Even something like Queen's Blood, which is very different, but somewhat similar-ish in some way with the grid fighting and shit. Like, I don't even know how you'd implement dice into it at all, man. It just doesn't make any sense. And look, card games do use dice. Like Yu-Gi-Oh, for example, which I've talked about off and on the channel. Like, we roll 2 dice usually to decide who goes first. Highest number is the winner, right? Or you might use a die to keep track of counters. And I know there's like damage counters in Pokemon, so I know when I was a kid, they had little stones you use for damage counters, but you could probably use a die for that as well. But in terms of like how Triple Triad and like Tetramaster are played, again, I don't know how you implement dice. The entire premise of Triple Triad and Tetramaster is the most cards win. By the end of the game, I took more of your cards than you took of mine. I'm the winner. That's literally it. Anyways, moving on. No info about Trance. Sorry. Well, that's a damn filler spot if I've ever seen one. That's nothing. What is this? What are you providing us with this? Just don't even put this. Battle is turn-based and camera zooming in dynamically. I don't know what you mean by this. So really quickly, a turn-based and the camera zooming in dynamically, that's what it did in the old RPGs, right? 7, 8, 9, 10. Whenever like a character would use an ability, the camera would like kind of zoom in on them and watch them do their attack, right? So that's nothing new. That's what we want. That's good. I do want to say, though, at the end, they put in parentheses that I don't know what she mean by this. And I'm trying to decide if that's just like a simple typo or if they're trying to get across, because English is their third language, as they tell us multiple times. English isn't like their first language, right? It's their third language or fourth language, potentially. And it's kind of reminded me of like Midori, when he used to fake being a little Japanese girl on Twitter and intentionally tweet out in broken English. And I say that just because they used the word mint previously. I don't know why you wouldn't just say, I don't know what she meant by this, or I don't know what she means by this. It just seems like an intentional misspelling to try to get across the fact that English isn't their first language. I could be looking way too much into it. Soundtrack is unchanged, very likely placeholder for the build. This kind of comes down to what sort of a remake it is. Is it just a visual remake? If so, they might keep the same soundtrack. They might slightly update it. If it's something like the 7 Remake, though, they'd probably redo all the music like they have done for the Remake project. And lastly, for their info here, they say, unfortunately, the graphics, it doesn't look like the fan demo Memory project. They mentioned the fighting and rendering is actually more like 7 Remake, maybe same engine, but the character models and art direction is exactly like the OG movies from the original. So right at the beginning, they have what, to me, appears to be another intentional grammatical error. Because they say, unfortunately, the graphics, it doesn't look like the Memory project, right? Which is not how you'd say that sentence. You'd say, unfortunately, the graphics don't look like the Memory project. And they use the word don't in like the outro of their post, right? Below this, when their whole little outro speech, they use the word don't. So they know that word. Even if like we pretend like they don't speak English as their first language, they know how to use the word don't in a sentence. So that doesn't make any fucking sense. It just kind of feels like to me like they got to like the end of creating this post and were like, we got to make some grammatical errors here to kind of get this point across, and like they kind of throw a few in there a little bit, because as you've seen, we've read almost the entire post at this point. There's not really been any problems, even though they mentioned like grammatical errors potentially happening in the post a few times and English not being their first language a few times, but there's not really any mistakes up till we got here close to the end. I'm kind of harping on this point a lot, but I've read shit from people that English isn't their first language, and you can tell, like the broken English. I have a few people that comment on my videos occasionally that can speak English, but it's not like their first language. You can tell, right? And this person does not come across to me as somebody whose English is like their third or potentially fourth language that they speak. Like, I just don't get that vibe at all. They speak it fluently. As for the actual info, they say that the graphics aren't like Memory Project, they're more like 7 Remake, which again contradicts with Midori, who the last time we'd actually talked about them, like the last bit of info we ever got from Midori, was that the art direction for 9 Remake was something similar to like Dragon Quest and the Memory Project. We fall into the same question again. Do we trust Midori, who's a much more credible source, or do we trust the random Reddit person who created their account literally today? As for which art direction that I prefer, it's something we've talked about a lot on the channel. It's another one that I'm kind of in the middle on. I don't really care. If you want to go the direction of Memory Project, Dragon Quest, that's perfectly fine. If you want to go the route of 7 Remake, good. And then they close out the post with, that's the information I have. Obviously source. Trust me, bro. What can you do? It can be fake. It can be true. Up to you guys. Again, English is actually my third, fourth language. So I'm sorry for any mistakes. I want to believe them because I've known them for a while, but I don't actually live in Japan long term, so I don't know. I'm just sharing here because I thought it was fascinating. Why I am not mentioning the company in relationship is because they, my source, is not aware I'm posting about this. I want to keep it as vague as possible and protect them just in case they do not know about Reddit also. So essentially, what they're trying to say with that last bit is,
my source is that I made it the fuck up.
I'm in agreement that this is, you know, pretty much utter bullshit. Like, it's just kind of, it's like the worst thing we've ever read for the 9 Remake. It's just, lazy. Like, it's not even like interesting information. You can't even provide something that's like vaguely fun to talk about. It was kind of fun to like tear apart and make fun of, but it's not like interesting concepts for a 9 remake. It's just boring. First, best off to you guys. What are your thoughts on this particular info, I guess, for 9 remake? Do you think it's legit? Do you think it's real? Are there aspects of it that you like? But the biggest question, of course, is English really the third language, or is it their fourth? Anyways, that's the video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. Search networks in the description below. Follow me to #YT. That's it. Bye. I've never done this left-handed before.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like low